everybody ready? Yep, ready. All right. We're on our series, Hearing from God. We're in the middle of a multi-part lesson on how to know God is speaking. So we're going to talk about how to discern if a message, if an inclination you have is from God or not. So let me tell you one of the signs up front, one of the signs that God is speaking to you. Heartburn. Heartburn. I'll explain that later. All right. So let me review the series so far. So we're in the series Hearing from God. We've previously discussed 20 different ways that God speaks to us. 20 ways that God speaks to us. We said that God speaks to us through the Bible. That's the primary way that God speaks to us. He speaks to us through His Word, through His written Word. He speaks to us when we read it, when we study it, when we memorize it. God is speaking to us. He also speaks to us through prayer. He speaks to us through a voice maybe a small, still voice or maybe a different voice. He speaks to us through pastors and teachers. He speaks to us through a prophetic word. So a prophet may have a word from God for us. He speaks to us through tongues and interpretations. He speaks to us through dreams and visions. He speaks to us through peace, a supernatural peace, and we'll get deeper into that today. He speaks to us through unusual circumstances or coincidences. He can speak to us through a fleece like he did for Gideon, where Gideon said, God, if this is you, then do this and that and the other. He can speak to us through closing doors or opening doors, opportunities. He can bring things to our memory. God speaks to us through inspired thoughts, through the prompting of the Holy Spirit. Speak to us through drawing attention to something. So when God spoke to Moses, he was walking and he saw a bush burning that wasn't being consumed. And it got his attention and he stepped aside. He stepped out of his path, and that's when God spoke to him. He can speak to us through nature or creation. God can speak to us through worship, through music. He can speak to us through emotions, through writing or through angels. So those are 20 different ways that we talked about God speaking to us. Let's see. So anybody have any thoughts or any comments on how God generally speaks to you? No? Okay. All right. So we'll go on. So we'll talk. Oh, go ahead.
There's some ways that I didn't even consider, because I think that's a very comprehensive opposite.
You said there's some ways you didn't think about, you said?
Yeah, so I just like that was comprehensive and good.
Oh, yes. So thank you. Yeah, and it was the first lesson in the series you can look at. I think it took us at least 2 lessons to get through all of those. And then we stepped through, we said, okay, God can speak to us. We want to discern if it's God, if we have a thought, a voice, an inclination. But then we said there are other things that can put these thoughts or inclinations into our mind as well. So first we covered those and we went through them. So we said it could be God that's talking to you, but it could also be from your own mind. It could be from your mind. It can be from the world. It can be from your flesh. It can be from your gut. It could be from the enemy that's speaking to you. It can be from your emotions. And so we looked at those, and I'll go through those briefly as a summary. So we said it can be from your own mind. So it can be the voice you hear could be your own voice. So maybe you have a plan, something you desire, something you came up with, and you're praying to God to come on board with it, but it wasn't from Him. So He didn't initiate this thought. You initiated it. You have people praying with you and for you, but it wasn't from God. So maybe it's your own voice, or maybe it's voice of your past trauma. So something that happened bad and it gave you a limiting belief about yourself, or maybe a limiting belief about God, or you have your relationship with your father makes you think that God is there. He just wants to punish you, or that you need to perform in order to get the love of God. So it could be your mind. And secondly, we said it could be the voice of the world. So the voice of the world being that the world is the system of non-Christian perspectives. So it's the science, it's the voice of the media, it's the voice of popular opinion. Non-Christians often believe that if you come to believe that there is a God, that's through reason. If you come to believe that there is a God, then that's through faith. I heard Tim Keller say recently that he said everything that people doubt about Christianity is also through faith. So he gave an example of people that say, oh, I can't believe that there's a God because how could a loving God, allow suffering? So that's why I don't believe there's a God. And he said, well, then that means that you believe that because you can't think of a reason that God would do it, then there must not be a good reason. He says, so basically you're putting faith in yourself because you can't or anybody else can't think of a reason. So you have faith that because you or someone else can't think of a reason, then there must not be a good reason. So it's like whatever reason you have against God, you have faith in something. You know, if you believe, oh, there must be more than one path to God, then you have faith in that opinion. You have faith in that opinion. So you have faith in something else. So it's not either faith or reason, it's faith or faith. It's just what is your faith substantiated by? And with the secular view, that faith, that belief is usually substantiated by our culture, our society, is substantiated by our historical context or our emotions. So whatever we believe, whatever someone believes, even if they believe, oh, you should feed the poor, or, oh, I believe this about, gender equality, or I believe this about rights, women's right, that's because we're in our certain place in culture, we're in a certain place in society, and we're a certain place in the world. So other people in other parts of the world may disagree with you. And so who's to say you're right? Just because you feel that, there's no reason that your opinion is right and someone else's is wrong. You don't have anything to stand on, versus if we're standing on the Bible, then we have something that we're basing that belief on, versus having nothing to base that belief on. You're basing it on the culture, your current culture, your position in the world, your position in history, and your emotion, how it makes you feel. I feel bad about that, so therefore it's wrong. You shouldn't do that because I feel bad about it. And any thoughts on that? No? Okay. And then we talked about your flesh. We talked about that you can be inspired by your flesh. So your flesh, we talked about lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. So with lust of the flesh, you want something because it feels good. It's a physical desire you have, or sinful tendencies. Lust of the eyes, it's you covet something, or you have a desire for status. And the pride of life is you want power, significance, or respect, or you want something that leads you to boasting. And then we talked about that also you can be influenced by your gut. So literally your intestines. So the bacteria, virus, fungus, candida, yeast inside your intestines influence your fleshly desires. And we looked at some scientific studies where bacteria influence your craving for sweets, craving for alcohol addictions are causing. And we looked at examples of studies on rats with obesity where, rats injected with a overweight person's bacteria became overweight, where the rats injected with a thin person stayed thin. So your literal gut can influence your desires, or your desire to eat, and your sexual desires as well. We're looking at an example of crickets, a study on sexual desires influenced by bacteria in crickets. And then we looked at that the enemy. You can be influenced by the enemy. And we looked at different ways that the enemy tries to influence us. And you can, as we go through this list, think of how many of these ways may the enemy be trying to come at you now during this lockdown. So the first way we looked at is that the enemy can come against you with strongholds. So a stronghold is a belief. It's a belief that goes against the belief of God. So an example would be, oh, the Bible is just old and that doesn't apply to today. So a stronghold isn't a sin. It isn't a sinful belief, but it's an argument or a thought pattern or reasoning that allows you to justify the sin. So it's something that allows you to justify the sin because you say, well, because of this, I don't believe the Bible point of view, or because of this, that doesn't apply right now. So a stronghold is a wrongful belief, or it could be a worldly belief that prevents you from following the Bible. Number two, the enemy comes at us with temptation. Temptation. So he tempts us with stuff we want that's against God. Number three, the enemy comes at us with fear. Fear. Fear is a tactic of the enemy. The enemy comes against us with isolation. He uses isolation to try to isolate someone, a Christian by themselves, to come against you. The enemy attacks you when you're vulnerable. Attacks when you're vulnerable. The enemy uses condemnation. We looked at the fact that a condemned building is a building that's unfit to be occupied. So the enemy wants to make you think that you're unfit to be occupied by the Holy Spirit. So he makes you think badly of yourself. The enemy comes against you with deception. Deception trying to make you value things that aren't valuable or make you believe something that's not real. The enemy comes with you with distractions. Things that keep you off your goal, keep your eyes off of God, takes your dove's eyes away. The enemy can influence your thoughts. We looked at example where the enemy influences your thoughts, and the enemy can use other people as well. The enemy can use other people. And then lastly, we looked at the fact that the enemy, or not the enemy, but that we didn't look at it. So this is a new one I'm introducing today, is that your emotions can also influence your hearing from God. So how you feel can influence your hearing from God. So we talked about fear, but it could also be maybe embarrassment. Maybe God told you to do something, but you're wondering, oh, well, what will people think if I do this? Or what will, I don't want to be embarrassed or, unhappy, or you're unhappy. I won't be happy if I do this, so your happiness. So your feelings, just your feelings in general, how you feel about it influences you hearing from God. So those are the ways that prevent you from hearing from God that we looked at previously. Hey, Kenneth. So let's see. Any thoughts on those so far? So those are a review. So that's a review of what we've done so far. No thoughts? Oh, my internet connection is unstable. Okay. Now we will review, last time we met, we looked at some ways to discern God's voice, that it is God. So we'll review a few of those, and then we'll continue with those. So the first way we looked at is, if you get a message from God, or you get a message and you think it's from God, and you think it's God's will, and you're not sure, how can you confirm that? And the first way we looked at is through the Bible. The Bible is the main way to determine if it's from God or not. If it disagrees with the Bible, then it's not God. I saw a quote this week that said, how do you know what God is going to say unless you know what he already said? How do you know how God is going to speak unless you know how he has already spoken? So we look at the Bible, we look at the ways God has spoken to compare it to the way God is speaking to us. We look at God's character, we look at God's ways, we look at the way God speaks to compare it. And we said when we're looking at the Bible, we want to look at the context. We don't want to just look at the verse and pull out the verse. We want to look at a few verses before, a few verses after. An example we looked at was the 1 John verse that's often used. Beloved, I pray that you prosper and be in good health as well as your soul prospers, which is often used that God always wants us to be healthy and God always wants us to be rich. But if we look at the context, if we look at the verse before, it's, John is saying, to my beloved Gaius, Then beloved, so the beloved is not God saying beloved. Beloved is Gaius, is the person who the letter is to. And the verse after says, and they told me about the good works you're doing. So it's he's specifically talking to Gaius, and it's a greeting to a letter. I pray that you prosper as well as your soul prospers. He's not even saying you're going to prosper, Gaius. He's saying, I pray that you prosper. So he's praying that Gaius prospers. So we can't apply that to ourselves and apply that to the church as a message from God. We also have to look at who was being spoken to in the verse. Who was it addressed to? There are scenarios where God speaks to Israel, and yes, we're adopted into God's family, so we can apply some of those verses to us. But we can't apply, if David made a promise to Jonathan, we can't take that as a promise from God to us. So we want to look at who was the verse to. We want to look at it as in alignment with the whole Bible. If we see one verse and we think it says, okay, all sinners are going to go to heaven and all Christians are going to go to hell, and if we look at, well, what's the rest of the Bible say, then we might want to say, well, maybe let me re-look at this verse. This one verse appears to say that, but let me, the whole rest of the Bible contradicts that, so let me re-look at this verse. How does it align with the rest of the Bible? And then also, if there's a word the Bible is saying, is it universally true? So I can apply that to myself, I can apply that to America, but is this something that applies to every culture? Is this something that will apply, that God always wants me to be rich? Is that something that will apply to someone who has a lifetime sentence in jail? Are they guaranteed what you think God is guaranteeing you? Does it apply to everyone equally around the world and at all periods of time? And what was the point of the verse? We looked at what was the main point of the verse. So we looked at it, the verse, a verse about do not make idolatry or another image, and it talks about heaven above or below and how that's applied to a flat earth theory, And yeah, I posted that as the short lesson, the flat earth portion, and immediately the flat earth people were on me. They were they were responding right away. One guy said, oh, well, I think the earth is in a centrifuge, and that's how it, and he went through this whole long explanation, and I was like, okay, I never heard that before, that's interesting, and it's like, okay, it's like, well, how do you explain satellites? That's a pretty exact science, where you have to have a pretty exact model of the earth. How do you explain satellites with a flat, but anyway, but yeah, so what was the point of the verse? And then we looked at getting counsel from wise Christians. So you want to get counsel from wise Christians as well. So if you think you have a word from God, you can talk to other wise Christians and get counsel. There's 3 types of spiritual leaders. I saw something that says this week. There's an evangelist who wants to connect you with the message of Christ. There's a teacher who wants to teach you the word and show you what it says about your life. And there's a mentor who's there to listen to your life. And so those are some example of people you can get counsel from, but you can get counsel from fellow Christians as well. So wise Christians, people that are along in their walk. Let's see, any thoughts on those 2 points? Oh, are you waving? Oh, you're waving. Hi. Hello. Hello, welcome. Lorraine, Tasha, Teddy. Welcome. Let's see. And I think Lorraine's waving at all of you guys.
You're muted.
Oh,
Lorraine, muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, cool. I thought that I didn't have the power to do that. Anyways, I was going to ask you if you could type what you just said about evangelists, teachers, and disciples. Yes. In the text.
Oh. Yeah, I'll type this one, but
in the chat.
yeah, But for the rest of them, yeah, you'll have to wait till the hopefully tonight, either tonight or tomorrow night.
Okay.
I'll post them all. But yeah, I
Awesome.
should have repeated it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It's okay. Yeah, so there's 3 types of spiritual leaders: evangelist, who wants to connect you with the message of Christ; the teacher, who wants to teach you the word and show you how it applies to your life; the mentor, who's there to help listen to your life. And so the first 2, the evangelist and the teacher, they're directed by their goal for you, whereas the mentor is going to start out asking you questions. So you can ask counsel from wise Christians. Also, we talked about the fact that God uses other people to confirm his word. God can use a pastor. God can use a Bible teacher. So you may be thinking of something. You go to church and the pastor talks about exactly what you were thinking about, confirming what you had thought, or either telling you that it's not wrong. It's a message you feel like, oh, that was directly for me. And so it could be a pastor, a Bible teacher in Bible study. It could be a fellow Christian gives you a word, or it could be a prophet. Someone says they have a word from God for you. God can use anyone to speak to you. And I actually have a story of that when I was trying to build my consulting business. I had an ex-coworker who would give me advice, and he was, he had really good advice, and he was like, he would let me call him anytime, like 11 o'clock at night. And so when I was trying to, every time I would come in, it got to the point where anytime I would come to a situation, I wouldn't move until I talked to him. I would talk to him first to get advice from him and get his opinion. And I was trying to there was a conference in IBM, so we went to a conference in Vegas, an IBM conference. So I was trying to get some business with IBM. And on the way back down in the conference, there was this drunk guy in the elevator. He was like a college age guy. His shirt was kind of messed up, dirt on it or something. And he was drunk in the elevator and just kind of out of it. And I was just kind of, okay, well, I'll just leave him in the corner there and hope he doesn't, And so we're going by the elevator, and then at some point he just turns and he's like, and he says something, da da da, and I'm like, uh-oh, he's talking. What did he say? And he says, there's only one God, right? I was like, what? He said, there's only one God, right? And then the elevator opens and he gets off the elevator. And I was like, what in the world is that? And then I realized that I was, basically coming to this person for every question, for every turn, thinking that this person was providing me with all the guidance and the answers, and not giving a credit to God, that, God can use whoever he wants. It's not this person that is guiding me, it's God, and God can use whoever he wants. And so God can use whoever he wants there, but then also God could use, a drunk person in the elevator to communicate. So God can use other people to communicate with you, or to confirm things, or to communicate with you. Has anybody else had any experience with another person giving them a word from God or a message from God?
Yeah, I have. I used to visit my grandmother at a long care rehab place, and I was talking to this guy in the lobby one day. He had this painting that he did, and I told him, I said, "Wow, I really like that painting," and it was like an abstract painting of a flower inside of a flower pot. And he started explaining it. He said, "Yeah, you see the green means life." Then he started explaining, like, he said, "Yeah, the red, that's the blood of Christ. That's the red in the painting, that symbolizes the blood of Christ." And then he started talking about the dirt being the earth, being well grounded. And then next thing I knew, he looked at his watch and he says, "Oh, I better get back upstairs before they discover I'm missing." He was from the psych ward. But even though I'm talking to the guy that was on the psych ward, I was having deep conversation with him. Does that make me crazy? but nevertheless, he was like ministering to me, you know. But he was up on the psych ward. He was psychiatric.
Oh, yeah, you may have they've had some spiritual influence. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Okay, and then God can also use prophets to confirm something He's saying. So I have 1 Thessalonians 5:19-21. It says, "Do not quench the spirit. Do not despise prophetic utterances, but examine everything carefully. Hold fast to that which is good." So it says, do not despise prophetic utterances. And so one of the interesting thing I stumbled upon this week is someone who claimed to have the gift of prophecy, talking about how they prophesy to people, but God doesn't speak to them in the same way. And they mentioned that when they prophesy for someone else, they're operating through their gift. They said, but when God speaks to them, it's not through their gift, it's through their relationship. And so I thought that was interesting. And then it got me thinking, did Old Testament prophets have the gift of prophecy?
Yeah.
What'd you say, Kenneth?
No, I just said, yeah, I'm waiting for you. You said, oh, is that a question?
That's a question, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Did the Old Testament prophets have the gift of prophecy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did. Absolutely. I'm trying to think of, because when you read in John, the book of John, it references a lot of things that were said by the prophet in the Old Testament.
Oh, yeah, the prophets were definitely speaking for God. They were definitely speaking for God in the Old Testament. But was that the gift of... So what these spiritual gifts, where do they come from?
Spiritual gifts.
God.
That's from God.
But they're gifts of the Spirit, of the Holy Spirit, right?
Oh, yeah, we're talking about the Holy Spirit.
Right. So they're gifts that you get from being indwelled by the Holy Spirit. So the Old Testament, they weren't... So the Old Testament prophets, God spoke to them directly. Like God would speak to them directly. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, but there was also like a time in the Old Testament when the Holy Spirit would come upon them.
Yes.
And then leave them, right?
Right. It would come upon them and leave them. Except for David, it came upon him and it said it never left him. So he's the only one that... It would come upon them, and then it would leave. So they would get inspired by... So I guess in that sense it could have been, but I think the prophets, it didn't mention it. But anyway, I don't know. It was interesting question.
Michael, I think also too, just like... I have a question. I think also just like, I don't know what version you were reading from in Thessalonians.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
NASB.
Okay, you know, because I think it's important too. You know, because like in the New King James Version talked about testing the spirit. You know, because just like there's a lot of people that believe in God. Yeah. Right.
Right.
So
right.
It's like sometimes we might be interacting with someone, our coworker, or our neighbor, or whatever, and we talk about God, and they'll talk about God, and we get all happy. Wow, that's great. But what God are you believing in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you have to test that spirit.
Yeah.
Are you talking about what God? You talking about the God of Jacob and Isaac, God of Abraham, or are you talking about the God of Baal?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
So you talk about, we have to test the spirit.
Yeah.
Because everyone that talks about spiritual things aren't might not be coming from the same spirit in which you think it is.
Yeah, definitely. And that's
the Holy Spirit is not the only spirit.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're looking at. These are ways to test it. These are ways to test the spirit. Asking counsel from wise Christians. Does it match with the Bible? So the ways we're looking at are ways you can test. You can test the spirit.
Well, that was a little bit scrambled to me because it seems like you went from talking about spirits and then God, and which God is it? There's only one God that I honor.
Well,
So,
right, but somebody else may honor some other God.
oh, okay, so
they may say, God told me this and this.
oh, okay, all right. So but then Rich said, well, which God is it that told you that? Right?
Yes.
Okay. The God.
For instance, like my mom is a recovering alcoholic, right? So as a kid, I used to always go to AA meetings, NA meetings with my mom, right?
Okay.
And part of the 12 steps is to believe in a higher power, right?
Oh, okay.
That higher power, they don't like to use God.
Yeah, they avoid yeah.
But that higher power, let's face it, it's believing something greater than yourself,
Right.
Which is God.
Mm-hmm.
My higher power could be a doorknob. It could be a tree.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. When you talk to people and people will say, "Yeah, I believe in God," I'm happy because at least they're God conscious, and that's a start that they believe that there's somebody greater than me. So now I want to dig deeper and find out, okay, who is this God that you believe in?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Hindus believe in God, many gods.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I come across that even with my daughter being a Jehovah's Witness. I'm like, you're praying, but you don't know who you're praying to. You're praying to the wrong God, the one that the concept of the witnesses put into her head.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the God the same God that I honor, that most of us Christians honor. Right. So we have our debates about that ongoing. But I'm trying to guide my granddaughter, her daughter, in the Word and our truth, and she knows the difference. She wants to respect her mother, but she wants to. Fortunately, my wife and I got some roots in her before she started hearing more from her mother's side. I'm trying to keep that going because she's thirsty for the Word, and she's been studying with her mother. But she said she said I don't want to disrespect Mom, but I don't really believe in the things that she's saying. I'm more in line with you and Nana believe in. And I said, well, you got to believe for yourself. I said, search. So I'm studying with him. Starting this Thursday, I'm going to start studying with him the book of John.
The book of John is a good place to start. Well, then you got to use, yeah. Well, the book of John is also an interesting place to start because that's the one where Reggie asked what version was I using. If you use their version versus a different version, it says it comes out with a different thing. That's the one of the places where it's a big difference. Their version.
Yeah.
And the word was a God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it also points out that God the Father and the Son are one and the same.
Well, it depends on the version. Not in their version.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
That's why I'm teaching her. Yeah, through our Bible, because their Bible. That's one of the biggest obstacles. One of them, because they don't believe that.
Well, that's probably the biggest. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the main one.
But there's others, but yeah. Okay. So when we talked about prophecy, we looked at that there are some things that we hear about prophecy that aren't necessarily biblically based. We hear that sometimes we hear prophecy will only be confirmation. So we said, yeah, someone giving prophecy could confirm something from God, but some people will take it further and say they will only give you something as confirmation. So if you haven't heard it from God, then it's not a true prophecy. Or they may say that prophecy will always be positive. You know, God will never tell somebody else something negative about you. Or they may say prophecy will only be about you. God won't give somebody else a word about you. It'll only be about yourself.
Oh.
But then we looked at Isaiah 38, 1 through 6, where Isaiah told Hezekiah, God told Isaiah to tell Hezekiah that he was going to die. And Hezekiah got greatly disturbed by it and started praying to God. And God said, okay, I'll give you a few more years to live. But we saw that, that wasn't confirmation, because that was the first time he heard it. It wasn't positive. Definitely, you're going to die isn't a positive statement. And it wasn't about Isaiah. It was about Isaiah talking to Hezekiah. So the one verse, debunked all three of those myths. I mean, but, there's many examples. Most examples of prophecy in the Old Testament disagree with those myths. But I guess those myths came into the church, though, to protect us from false prophets, or the people say, what spirits, that people that come say, I have a word for you, and to protect against that. But it goes a little overboard in protecting. Let's see. And then, so one we talked about, which we'll go over again, is that God can use, if you have a word you want to know if it's from God, you can test it. You can ask God for confirmation. And God can confirm it through any of those 20 ways we listed. So he can confirm it through the Bible. He can confirm it through other people. He can confirm it through coincidences. He can confirm it through opening a door, closing a door. So God can confirm it. If you ask God for confirmation, he can confirm it. And I gave the example of when I was fasting a few weeks before Easter. I was skipping dinner, and at one point I felt led, well, maybe I should skip breakfast too. And I asked for confirmation, and I mentioned that I hadn't drinking tea. I hadn't used Splenda for a while, and I had got some Splenda, had a packet on the desk, flipped it over. This was like an hour later, and I saw that it said, keep the fast and breakfast. And I actually brought that one today. It said,
Okay.
Keep the fast and breakfast.
Oh, here it is. Oh, yeah. Wow, you actually came across that.
Yes, well, I kept it. I was like, I'm not going to use that sugar. Let me use it. I was like, okay, I guess.
How long ago was that?
That was about 2 weeks before Easter.
Oh, okay.
2 weeks before Resurrection Sunday, I should say.
Yeah.
But we won't get into that, I guess. Yeah. Can you think of any examples where God has given you confirmation for something? Anyone?
Well.
Yes, he did give me confirmation. So it was, I had prayed for to travel at one point in my life, and so I had prayed about it and left it alone. I was just like, he'll work on it, and so what ended up happening was I worked in this building by myself at night, and the only person that came in there was the lady who cleaned up. And so we were friends, and so one day, I think it was around the holiday, she gave me a box. And so now we're on first name basis, not last, because it was kind of like hard to talk to her. We had different languages and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So she only knew my first name. So what ended up happening was she gave me this box. I opened it up, and it was actually one of those it holds all of your passport, your railway, your ticket.
They call it a secretary.
Yes. So So I opened it up and I was like, what? So then I was like, it's like all about travel, right? And then I look on the back, well, actually on the front, it was on the front, and it said my last name. And I was like, did you know my last name? Right? And so she was like, no. Like, I don't know your last name. I don't know your last name. And so I just like felt the Holy Spirit be like, you know, it's time, you know? And so I was like, wow. And then after that, like, God just kept opening doors for me to travel. Like, you know, I went as far as Singapore, you know? And it was just like, he just kept blessing, you know, all the trips and everything like that. And so that was my confirmation. Like, that was like, I had never had anything like that happen to me before. So it's kind of like your Splenda, where it said, it was specifically, it was quoted fast. Yeah, like it said my last name. I still have it in here, so it's crazy. I'm like, wow, God is really personal.
Yes, you still communicate?
Really personal.
Do you still communicate, you and she?
Oh no, actually, we parted ways because my company left the building, and so, but I do remember her name. Her name was Maria. She was like a mom to me. But yeah, so she was like, "Why are you crying?" I was like, "Because it was the Lord." You know, so it was like, even though we had language barriers, she knew what I was talking.
Did she know that you got an opportunity to travel?
No, she didn't know. She didn't know that part. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I got to do it.
Anybody else have any examples of confirmation?
Singapore is not bad either. It's a nice place to get to go.
Yeah, it's fun.
So I have, I fasted for the first time right before Lent, right? I think. But anyways, I'd never done it before. And what was funny was that I was watching, I don't normally watch YouTube videos, but somehow something came up and it started talking about fasting. And I was like, what in the world? And I had already been thinking about it. And then I got a text from another friend, and she's like, hey, I was thinking of fasting. Do you want to fast with me? I was like, I'm thinking about it. And then all of a sudden, Tasha goes ahead. Actually, I think we did a 3-way with a friend. And she's like, I'm thinking of fasting. Do you guys want to fast? I was like, all right, God, I hear you. Guess we're fasting. But, yeah.
Yeah, that's confirmation.
It was crazy. But, yep, so God.
Yeah, amen. Okay. So let's see. So confirmation, you can ask God for confirmation. So another way to confirm, to test if it was God was, does it align with the previous word from God? So who has Proverbs 16:9?
I do.
Okay.
Proverbs 16:9, NIV says, in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps.
Right. So we plan our way, but the Lord establishes our steps. And so, so does it align with a previous word from God? So one time when I felt that God was telling me to start teaching. You know, I hadn't heard from God in a specific direction. I think that may have been the first time He told me to teach, or maybe not, but I said, okay. So I didn't know what or where. So I went, and then next Sunday at church, they said, hey, we're doing growth group. You know, anybody wants to join a growth group or lead a growth group, go sign up. So I went and signed up to lead a growth group. I said, okay, this must be what it is. You know, God told me to teach. You know, maybe I should lead a growth group. And then a few weeks later, we had a meeting for all the growth group leaders. It was me. There was a couple that lived in San Jose was going to start a growth group, and 2 or 3 other people. And then 2 weeks after that meeting, I got an email that said, "You've been assigned to so-and-so and so-and-so's growth group." It was the couple who was there, lived in San Jose. And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. I've been assigned to their growth group." I said, "That's not teaching." I said, that doesn't line up with the previous word I got from God." And so it was like, okay, that must not be what it was. So starting a growth group must not have been it. So then, tried something else. So we ended up starting something on our own. But so it's like God told me something, and then the next thing that happens is like, well, that doesn't line up with what He told me, so that must not be in alignment with it. So does it line up with something you clearly heard, or does it contradict it? That's one way to test if it's God. Let's see, has anybody had that happen?
I was just thinking about how that could influence something that you may want to do, and it contradicts what you want to do.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
then,
that's
how do you resolve that? It's like, well, I don't know if that's, it's like, is that when you like ask for confirmation?
Yeah. Well, the teaching conflicted with what I wanted to do. That wasn't what I wanted to do.
So what do you do about that? How did you handle something like that? That's not what you want to do.
Well, I was just kind of happy that it was so clear, because I hadn't heard many clear words before. So, that, in that situation, but other situations, I just go ahead and do it and figure, be obedient. But ask for confirmation. Yeah, like the skip breakfast. It was like, okay, I need some confirmation for this. I need it because that definitely conflicts with my plan. Because I'm not even a really big on fasting. Like, I don't necessarily believe that we're still called to fast. So that was definitely not something I was wanting to do. Or fast for, I think we're called to fast. Jesus fasted, but not necessarily for a religious this time of year fast, because those are the fasts that Jesus didn't do. The fast this time of year. For if you have a personal reason, then yeah. But like as a religion as a whole, the whole church is going to fast. Those were the types of fasts Jesus didn't do. Those are the fasts that the Pharisees criticized him for not doing. They're like, hey, you guys are eating. You're supposed to be fasting. And Jesus is like, yeah, that's for y'all. That's the bridegroom is here, so we're gonna eat. And
So at what point should one fast? Because the whole purpose of fasting is to weaken, is to weaken you and humble you.
Well, there's multiple reasons. Humble you isn't necessarily the purpose. Humble is the term that they use. It is, but humble is the term they use for fasting. So humbling yourself was synonymous for fasting. So it is a way of humbling yourself. But fasting, if you want to hear from God clearly, it would be a method. If you want to, because we talked about how the bacteria and things influence your stomach, so it quiets the influences, the external influences you may have. If you want to connect with God, if you want to hear, like maybe you aren't hearing God's will, if you want to hear from God, if you feel led to fast as well. It's not wrong to do a corporate fast. It's not wrong, but
no, I'm not. That's not the reason for my question.
Okay.
I was thinking as an individual, if you didn't want to participate, or even if you did, as a corporate, what would one use to determine when they want to fast?
Well, I guess if you felt led, or if you feel you're not hearing, you want to connect with God better, you're not hearing from God, you need clarity on something, you need clarity on a situation,
Okay.
so those are some of the reasons.
Can I say something?
Can't remember the others. I did a lesson on. Yes.
Yeah. For me, Kenneth, it's I will fast when I want to really show my dependence upon God. For me, it's a way of me saying, God, I'm emptying myself. I'm emptying myself to the point of no food. You know,
Yeah.
I usually drink, when I fast, but even some people fast where there's no food or water. So for me, it's like when I fast, if I need to hear from God, like serious situation, I'm like, it's my way, is my pleading to God, Lord, I'm totally emptying myself.
Okay.
To you, to where that I'm totally emptying myself to show that I am totally dependent upon you, and I need you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I desire you.
And that's
I desire to hear from you.
Yeah.
I'm putting everything. I'm putting you before everything, even food. That sustains my life.
Right.
So that's
very good.
That's for me.
And that's the humbling yourself.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah,
there lies the whole thing of humbling yourself.
Yeah, that's the humbling yourself.
Yeah.
I think too,
Someone else?
yeah, thank you. I think one reason that I had probably started was to support somebody who was praying about something and praying about something and praying about something repeatedly and not getting an answer.
I can't hear you.
It's hard to hear you, Angel.
Yeah, I can't hear.
Oh yeah, can you speak up a little bit?
Hear me now?
Just a little bit louder.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I think one possibility too would be to support somebody who's going through something that another Christian that they have been praying about and praying about and praying about something, and how God says sometimes something doesn't happen except by prayer and fasting. So when it's really, really important, for my friend's or my stepsister's daughter was very sick, and she was just so discouraged, and so I said something about, well, why don't we, to support her, why don't we pick a day and fast and pray on it, and that way, there's more power when we're doing it together. And so we started it for that purpose. The first day we did it only just to pray for her daughter specifically, and then it's kind of branched out from there. So we're praying for other things too, but it became a monthly thing that we would do. And it's something that really encourages my stepsister, and it also really encourages her daughter that we're praying for to know that we're fasting and praying for her.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was this type only comes out from fasting and praying. And Jesus, when the disciples couldn't cast out the demon.
Well, thanks to both of you for that, Brother Alex.
You're welcome.
Statements. Yeah, appreciate that.
Okay. So the next method that you can use to discern if it was God to test is, does it align with your purpose? So assuming you know your purpose, then is this in alignment with it? Are you being told to do something that's in alignment with it? So there's purposes, and so the next lesson might be on how to discern your purpose, potentially. But you have a purpose and you have a season. So you may have a season where you're supposed to do something, but it's not necessarily your purpose, but it's what you're supposed to do right now. And maybe you don't know your life purpose, but you know God told you to do this right now. You know this is your next step, and so it may be leading you to your purpose. And then you may get to the end of your life and you look back and you see how God had a plan. You know, how God had a plan to let you end up somewhere, And so I'm not specifically clear where I'm supposed to go, but I know that, I'm supposed to be doing this right now. But I look back at the things that happened, and I see how they led me, here. You know, I remember in college I was trying to find a job, and I was getting tutoring. I was at the tutoring center, and the guy who leads it said, "Hey, you know, you're an engineer." He said, we don't have any, you know, African American math tutors." I was like, "Ooh, yeah, I don't like math, and I mean, I know math. I'm pretty good at math, but I don't like math, and I don't want to tutor anybody." He said, "Okay," and he said, "You computer science?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, well, can you come back here Thursday at 1?" I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to tutor nobody though." And so I ended up, I don't know why I went back Thursday at 1 and ended up, so I was looking for a job, and he just basically gave me the job. And it was interesting because at that time, so this is 20 years ago, most jobs on campus paid $6 an hour. And it was, there was the parking attendants, the people who took the parking, that was an $8 an hour job. So that was the job that everybody on campus wanted. But you had to be in like a fraternity, or you had to have connections in order to get that job, the $8 an hour job. Then he told me, well, tutoring pays $12 an hour. I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is God. Well, no, I don't think I was listening for God at the time, but I was like, this is, whoever this is, maybe let me consider it. And then, you know, after tutoring, I found, you know, then later on, somebody called, some people, parents, and they wanted somebody to tutor their high school kid. They would get calls periodically. And the going rate, so I went to UCLA, and it's between Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Westwood, and Brentwood, some of the richest neighborhoods in the country. And so they're paying to tutor high school students. They were paying $35 an hour to tutor the high school students. I was like, oh, well, maybe I can give that a shot. So I don't know what they're paying now. That was 20 years ago. So I tried it, you know, but I had, you know, so much time, man. But then I got another opportunity. I said, no, I can't do it. But then I was like, well, these engineering students trying to get an $8 an hour job. So I went into the engineering study center and was like, hey, who wants to earn $15 an hour teaching high school kids math? So I started a company, and I got $15 an hour. They got $15 an hour. And all was well until they figured out I was getting $15 an hour. And then, you know, they ended up starting their own tutoring company. But anyway, so I started a tutoring company. Then later on, it was basically the same thing with when I started doing consulting. I started a consulting company. It was the same thing. But then the teaching I did there was like, okay, it came back around. So it was like, okay, I can see that it was all a plan. It was all for a purpose.
Do you feel that the Lord had done things in your life previous to that to prepare you for that?
Previous to that?
Yeah. Could you see where things that you had done in life had prepared you for that?
Not for the teaching necessarily. I mean, maybe, yeah, not necessarily. I think that was maybe preparing me for maybe this, or for the consulting company. I think that was. I mean, there were other things around there, one that I'll get to in the next one, but yeah, so I think that was kind of the preparation. That was.
I like to pose that question to everybody. Does anybody feel or that you've had to experience where God had prepared you for something that you've done later on in life? Do you guys understand what I mean? Have you had that kind of experience and you realize, oh wow, the Lord must have been preparing me for this? Nobody? No?
I do. I think that God earlier on had me, because I'm an engineer too, and I got into petroleum and refineries and marine terminals and stuff. And like, I guess my whole life, I thought that, you know, making all the money in the world was was what I needed to do, right? And that would bring happiness. And so I did that for 15, 17 years, something like that. And I made all this money, and there was like no real happiness. I mean, I had a bunch of stuff, but it was short-lived. Okay. And then I got laid off, and I came home, and I was like, all right, I've got 15, 17 years of experience under my belt. I have no problem getting hired by anyone. Like, Genentech is who I wanted. And it just wasn't working out. I had 3 different people that worked for the company putting my resume in, and I was just never being called, and it was just crazy. And so I ended up starting a pet service business, and it started off slow, but then I joined this church, and this lady kept inviting me to dinner and to lunch, and I was like, this lady, she's going to talk to me about the Bible. Isn't it enough that I'm going to church? Fine, I'll come to dinner. And like slowly but surely she kept, so I do this Bible study, and right now we're learning this. And then, after a while she's like, so do you have any questions or anything? And I was like, well, like, no one's ever been able to answer these questions, but she's like, well, try me. And so I asked her, like, every question that I ever had, and she was able to answer it by using the Bible. And I was like, what, these answers are in the Bible? What are you talking about? And I saw every question was answered through the Bible. And because I was like, why did I go through all this education, go through all these years of petroleum, and now I'm here and not really doing anything, but I'm doing pet service. And then,
rededicated?
I rededicated and I rebaptized I got baptized again.
Amen.
Then my friend was like, she's like, oh, I go to CEF, and they're having this program for a week. Do you want to go? And I was like, no, I've got a client for that whole 2 weeks. And she's like, oh, are you sure you don't want to do it? I'm like, no, and then all of a sudden this client, who was like a pain in the behind, all of a sudden 3 days before I was supposed to start the job, she cancels on me, and she goes, oh, well, I just don't feel right, and I'm making my husband stay home, and I'm going to go on vacation myself. And I was like, what the heck? And so I called my friend. I'm like, fine, I'm going. And so it was a whole week of learning the Bible and how to teach kids about the Bible and about Jesus and about God and everything. And I was like, what is all this stuff? And it like started coming together, like I was understanding it. And it was crazy that after that, I started teaching a Good News Club twice a week. And then soon, and I started teaching Sunday school. And then my church hired me as the children's ministry director. Wow. And I was like, what in the world? I'm like, all right, God, I see. You wanted to show me that making all this money wasn't gonna bring you happiness, but now I don't make as much as I used to, but I'm happy. I've got joy. I've got, peace. I've got all that. And it's like God was showing me, step by step, because I was like, why am I home? And so the engineering hasn't stopped in my brain, but it's good. I mean, this is where God calls, and you just have to answer that call. But
Amen. Amen.
but now it took a while, but looking back, I can see how God was shaping me and how He got me back here.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That's
Amen.
good.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. But God prepares us for things, and sometimes things that happen to us, unfortunate things. It's not so much meant for you, even though you're going through it, but it could be for someone else.
Yeah.
And you'll find later on that what happened to you, you'll be a blessing to someone else.
Yeah. Or God can use it. So even if it wasn't meant for you or meant to happen, but God can use it to benefit you or someone else. Yeah. Yeah, so that'll bring us into our next one. So sometimes, like we were saying, sometimes things just... Were you going to say something, Angel?
Oh, I was just going to say I wanted to hear about the heartburn.
Oh, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there.
So,
the heartburn. Oh, you missed the intro. So so things so sometimes things effortlessly fall into place. So that's another sign that it could be God, another test if things just effortlessly fall into place. Like you don't have to, like things just happen, things just come together. And so who has Acts 18, 1-3? That's an example of that.
I didn't get one.
Oh, you can get the last one if we get there.
Does anybody have that? 18, 1-3?
Yeah, somebody has it.
Make sure you're not muted. Check your mute.
Oh, that's Henry. Let me unmute him. Okay, you can go, Henry. I unmuted you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So here we go. Acts 18. So it says here, Paul left Athens. Oh, then Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he became acquainted with a Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently arrived from Italy with his wife Priscilla. They had left Italy when Claudius Caesar deported all Jews from Rome. Paul lived and worked with them, for they were tent makers, just as he was.
Right. So Claudius told all the Jews to leave Rome. So Aquila and Priscilla had to leave Rome. They happened to go to Corinth where Paul was. They happened to be of the same trade. So Paul said, so they stay together. And then Aquila and Priscilla end up being some of the major characters in building the original church. So they end up being some of the major pillars of building the church. And so it just convenient coincidences. Some things happen, or so if it just things just happen to work out, things happen to come together. Like Lorraine's story is like, oh, she happened to have all of the answers in the Bible, and this person happened to. So it's like things just happen effortlessly, fall into place. It wasn't, you didn't really plan it. It just happened that way. That's a sign that it could be God. One of the things I can remember with that is that I, in high school, like I always knew I wanted to go to college. My parents, told me I needed to go to college, but they didn't know about, oh, you got to take this test, or oh, you should take these classes, or anything like that. We didn't know any of that stuff. But I like computers, so the computer teacher also happened to be the college counselor. And so I became friends with the computer teacher, and then she happened to have a class, or you could work with her for a period, and that would count as a class. And so she asked me if I wanted to do that. So I ended up doing that, And then she told me, oh, well, you know, that's when I found out, oh, you got to take these classes in order to get to college. Oh, you know, there's tests. You got to take the PSAT. You got to take the SAT. I'm like, oh, I never heard of those before. And so it's like, you know, so it's like, I happen to like computer science. And so she happened to also be the college counselor. And since I happened to work there, then I found out, oh, I need to do all this stuff in order to apply for college. You know, I didn't know you had to, I thought, you know, once you graduate, then you figure out where you want to go for college. I didn't know you had to do all of this stuff, you know, a year in advance or apply for stuff or take tests. And so I happened to work for her, and then I found out all of this stuff and I could do it. And so it just and it worked out. And I happened to end up wanting to be, you know, a computer science major. And, you know, so it just effortlessly fell into place. It wasn't something I planned or something. It just kind of worked its way out, you know, similar with the tutoring. You know, I didn't look for the tutoring job, but it just happened that he asked me to tutor, and it didn't really interview me, it kind of forced me into it. You know, I didn't even have an interview. It was kind of like, well, can you start on Tuesday? I'm like, well, I haven't, I don't think I really want to do this, but you know, it just kind of fell into place.
I think God was leading you then. I mean, because you can't just...
Yeah, definitely.
The classes that you were taking, you didn't know, but, and I guess you made good grades in it.
Yeah, I made good grades.
And so those kind of classes qualified you for the next step, pass the SAT, and, you know, you end up where you, and then even, that's not coincidence, even the teacher that you had.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was like I like computer science, accounting, and home ec because we ate in home ec. So I was like, those are the only three. I said, okay, if home ec is a major, I'll take this. That wasn't a major, but.
Oh, that's what you wanted to go with.
I was like, if I can eat, I'll do eating.
That's okay. Oh, yeah.
Like, no, I was like, okay, well, I like computer science and I like accounting. And she happened to be the computer science professor, and it wasn't, you know, there wasn't much. This was before the .com and all of that, so it wasn't. And then I happened to graduate and move up here, and the .com, you know, then all of a sudden became Silicon Valley. It was like, oh, okay. There was no, you know.
I wanted to say something about the experience. Oh, okay, so. I felt like the Lord was leading me to, I was going to like a fashion school and super expensive, and I was getting good grades and everything like that. And, but I was transitioning to like, you know, my relationship with the Lord was transitioning. And so, one day I felt like it was like a move on my spirit, like to leave the school, right? And I was like, why would I leave this school? Like, that is so, like, it just doesn't make any sense. I have good grades, I'm doing well. And the Lord was like, no, you need to do flowers. And I was like, what? And I was like, flowers? And I was like, wait, what? And so I was like, I'm going cuckoo. So I talked to the administrators, and I was like, the Lord told me to leave the school and to do flowers. And she was like, the Lord told you to do that? And I said, yes. And so then she was like, she was like, okay, well, we're going to sign you out. So I was like, I'm supposed to get a bachelor's, I'm supposed to get a master, you know, in fashion. And then, so what ended up happening was I was going to church and everything like that. And so I told my pastor, you know, I was like, the Lord told me to do flowers. He was like, oh, okay, that's great, because we have this anniversary that you need to do course. Like, it was this huge order. And I was like, wait a minute. He just told me this. Like, I don't know how to do it. Like, so then I get on the BART to go to work. And there's this lady that has a book that's open, and it's all like agriculture and everything like that. And so I'm looking, and I'm like, oh, are you studying like floristry? And she was like, yes, I am. And I was like, oh, that's so cool, right? And I was like, I I was just given the order to do floristry. I have no idea how to do corsages and veneers. She was like, well, here's my number. Come over to my house and I'm going to show you how to do it. I was like, what? And so then I was like, wait a minute. So I was that crazy to go over there. She's a really nice lady. She looked like me. So she was like, here, this is how you do it. And she walked me through the whole process for free and showed me how to do it. And so that was my first experience. And I was like, the Lord, like, you know, I was just trying to be obedient.
Yeah.
But she literally like walked me through the whole process. And I was able to do it without any schooling. I did eventually go to schooling later, but the beginning stage, she just like walked me through. It was just like someone on the BART. And it was just like random.
Right.
So yeah.
And your pastor just happened to give you an order. Like,
I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't sign up for it. I was going to fashion school. Like, I was going to be some hot rock star, you know?
Yeah.
But no.
Sometimes things God gives us things, it doesn't look the way we imagine it.
Yeah.
But still, it's a creative, it's a position that requires creativity. So you just applied it in a different place, different area.
Exactly. He just had me on his side.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to we're gonna leave the rest for next week, but I'll skip to the heartburn. I'll skip to the heartburn.
I was saying, yes,
Skip to the heartburn.
Angel really wants to see you. I do too.
I'll skip to the heartburn. Okay, so given that Easter just passed, so we're going to talk about after the Easter story. So after the Easter story, after Jesus rose from the dead, and then he was walking. He was walking and he ran into some disciples. So it wasn't the 12 disciples, but he ran into some men on the road. And so that's what we have Luke 24, 31 to 32. Jesus was talking to these men on the road. And they were telling him what just happened. He's like, what just happened? They're like, you don't know what just happened? You know, Jesus just died. And he was telling them all the story of what happened. And then he explained to them about himself in the scriptures. He explained to them. Then we get to verse 31. It says, and then told him he was going to keep going. And they said, no, come with us. And he went into their house and broke bread with them. They sat down at a table with them. And on verse 31 it says, then their eyes were open and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight. They said to one another, were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking to us on the road? While he was explaining the scriptures to us. So while he was talking to them, their hearts were burning. Jesus was explaining the scriptures to them and they said their hearts were burning. So that's another sign that it's God talking to us, that our hearts will burn. You know, we get a message and our hearts just burn for it. You know, our hearts burn. You get a strong sensation of God's presence. You get a strong sensation that God was with you. You get a strong sensation of his presence. Something inside you ignites. It ignites something inside of you. You know that it was God. You get a renewed enthusiasm. You get a irrational hope. You get a peace that surpasses understanding. It's a burning heart. Something burns inside of you. So you feel an intense communion with God that inspires you to do something. It inspires you more than normal. So it changed these disciples from mourning about Jesus' death to going out and proclaiming that Jesus is alive. And so the disciples, the 11, they went from a group of doubting fishermen, fearful tax collectors, questioning Jesus, being his followers, and it turned them into bravely facing, risking their lives, death, speaking in front of thousands, the burning in their hearts. So a word from God can change you. And so that's what happened to me, was one word from God changed me. He said, teach. He told me to teach. And so, and that changed me. It changed me from, sitting in the pews and not wanting to be involved. I had done so much as a child. I said, I'm not going to volunteer for anything. So I just went to church. I'm just going to sit in the back. I'm not even going to really meet any people. I'm just going to leave. I can go home. I can do my socializing, on other stuff, on Meetup or at the club. I don't need to meet any of these people. I'm just going to go to church and leave. But one word, teach, changed me. It changed my focus from just focusing on me to wanting to do a ministry. From spending all my time on my own pleasure to spending maybe 20 hours a week preparing for the ministry and the videos and all of that. And so so one word from God, a fire, can ignite a fire in you that can change you. The voice of God, it can change you, it can ignite something in your chest. And that's another sign. That's another sign that it's God, that it burns a fire in you. So I pray that God burns a fire within you. So during this lockdown period, that something inside of you gets ignited. So that a fire inside of you gets ignited, that a desire for God stirs up inside of you, that it takes you to another level, and you want to just serve God even more. So let's walk in the way, let's seek the truth and live the life.
I've been in a situation where sort of like Jonah, and that's what I'm like. God was calling me to step out in deeper waters, and I was like, I'm not ready. This is, that's what I mean. But then when I trusted Him and stepped out there, I saw how in the past some of the skills that it took, God had prepared me for it in other ways in my life, to do the job successfully. But most of all, there's someone else recognized, because I was so hesitant, there was a lot of conflict about it too. But it's like another individual said, well, it won't be him, meaning me, doing it. It will be the Holy Spirit doing it.
And when you led the men's group,
leading the men's group, which I had never done before. But but God prepares us for things, and sometimes things that happen to us, unfortunate things. It's not so much meant for you, even though you're going through it, but it could be for someone else.
Yeah.
And you'll find later on that what happened to you, it'll be a blessing to someone else.
Yeah. Or God can use it. So even if it wasn't meant for you or meant to happen, but God can use it to benefit you or someone else. Yeah.